Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight we settle into a story about a bus that took a different route. There is something about a city at 3 a.m. that belongs to a different world entirely. The streets are not empty, not exactly. They are simply returned to themselves. The tram lines gleam under the amber wash of the streetlights. The cobblestones in the old quarter hold the faint dampness of an earlier rain. Shopfront are dark. Cafe chairs are stacked. Somewhere, a pigeon shifts on a ledge without waking. The city breathes, but slowly. The long, slow breath of something that has forgotten for a few hours that it is supposed to be busy. This is the hour that belongs to the night bus. Dorota knew this hour, the way she knew the smell of a hospital corridor, or the weight of her bag after a 12-hour shift. Intimately, without needing to think about it. Every Tuesday night, she finished her shift at the end of day handover, pulled on her coat, walked the 4 minutes to the stop on Ulika Marszałkowska, and waited. The bus came at 3:10. It was always the same driver, a broad-shouldered man who never spoke, but always nodded. And it was always the same route, down through the new quarter, across the river bridge, left along the park, then through the grid of residential streets to her stop on Prosta. 22 minutes, door to door. She had counted. She stepped onto the bus tonight, as she always did. 1 foot on the rubber step, the card beeping against the reader, the warm, close air of the interior settling around her like something familiar. She found a seat near the middle. She placed her bag between her feet. She pressed her head back against the glass and let the city move past her in the way that cities move past you when you are very tired, in soft impressions rather than sharp details. A lit window, a car at a junction, the brief bright mouth of a petrol station, and darkness again, and the murmur of the engine, and the slight hypnotic swaying of the bus as it moved through streets it knew by heart. She closed her eyes, not to sleep. She would not let herself sleep, not here, not yet, just to rest them for a moment, just to give them something to do other than register the world. The bus turned left. She felt it in the way you feel a turn when your eyes are closed. The slight lean of your body, the shift in the engine's sound as it adjusted to a new angle. It was nothing alarming. Buses turned. This one turned often. But something about this particular turn reached through her tiredness and touched a small, quiet part of her attention. And she opened her eyes. The street outside was Krokmalna. She blinked, looked again. The sign was there, fixed to the side of a building at the corner, white lettering on blue. And it said Krokmalna. And she knew Krokmalna, had walked it many times, knew its particular width and its particular buildings. But the bus should not have been on Krokmalna. Krokmalna was not on the route. The route turned left on Jelazna. She knew this, had watched it 100 times. The junction with the pink-fronted pharmacy and the old locksmith's sign. There was no turn onto Krokmalna. The route did not go that way. She straightened in her seat and looked ahead. The bus moved on, unhurried, the same steady pace, the same low engine sound. Nothing had changed. Not the lights, not the warmth, not the faint creak of the chassis. The driver's silhouette was still there in his seat, broad-shouldered, still. He had not tensed. He had not adjusted. He drove as if Krokmalna was exactly where he had intended to be. Dorota looked at the other passengers. There were 7 of them. She counted without meaning to. The nursing habit, the clinical instinct, always counting, always assessing. An older man near the front with a canvas shopping bag on his knees. 2 women in their 50s sitting side by side but not speaking. A young man near the back with his head tilted toward the window. A woman about Dorota's age with a long gray coat folded in her lap. A child, perhaps 10, perhaps a little older. Sitting very straight with both hands flat on the seat beside her, and one more, further back, a figure she couldn't quite bring into focus. None of them seemed concerned. The older man near the front was looking out of his window. So was the young man at the back. So was the child with her hands flat. All of them, she realized slowly, every single passenger on that bus, was looking out of a window. Not at phones. Not at each other. Not at the dark ceiling of the bus. Out. At the street. As if they were watching for something. Or watching something arrive. The bus turned again. She did not recognize the street. This was not alarming exactly. Warsaw had more streets than she had walked. But something in the quality of the unfamiliarity was unusual. It was not the unfamiliarity of a place she had simply never been. It was the unfamiliarity of a place she almost recognized. The buildings were right. The proportions, the height, the general style. 4-story tenements with narrow windows and decorative stonework above the doorways. She had seen this architecture 1,000 times, but the details were different. A building on the corner had no signage at all, just plain dark stone. Another had an awning, she had never seen that color. A deep ochre, almost gold. A third had curtains in the window that looked, and she knew this was a strange thing to think, like curtains from a different decade. She pressed her face slightly closer to the glass. The streets were lit, but differently. The lamps were the right shape, the curved poles, the round globes, but their light was a deeper amber, almost orange, and it pooled on the wet cobblestones in a way that felt older somehow, like photographs she had seen of the city in another time. Not ruined, not war-damaged, not dramatic, just earlier, as if the bus had turned not only onto a different street but into a slightly earlier version of itself. A tram passed in the other direction. She watched it go. The right color, the Warsaw red and yellow, the right shape, but the number on the front was 17, and she did not know a line 17. There had not been a line 17 in years. Decades, perhaps. She was not certain. She was not certain of much at that moment, except that her bag was still between her feet, and the seat was still solid beneath her, and the bus was still moving. She pressed the stop request button. The bell sounded, that familiar soft chime, and the small orange light above the driver blinked on, but the bus did not slow. It continued at the same pace, the same steady, unhurried movement through the amber-lit streets. A full minute passed, then another. She watched the orange light. It stayed on. She pressed the button again. The chime sounded again. The light was already on. Nothing changed. She looked toward the driver. His silhouette had not moved. Broad shoulders. A slight forward lean. The the set of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has no particular interest in questions. She turned back to the window. The street they were on now was wider. An avenue, almost, linden trees on either side, their branches bare and intricate against the orange sky. The buildings here were grander, 4, 5 stories, with wrought iron balconies and pale facades that caught the lamplight and gave it back in a warm, almost honeyed glow. She thought she knew this avenue. She thought she had walked it, or one like it, in the old quarter. But the old quarter was the other direction, and the old quarter did not look like this. Not anymore. Not with these intact facades, these unrestored balconies, these awnings. It looked like a street from before. She did not know precisely before what. She only knew the feeling of the word, before, and the particular quality of stillness that the avenue had, even as the bus moved through it. The linden trees did not move. There was no wind. The wet cobblestones reflected the orange lamps in long, wavering lines. The buildings stood on either side as buildings stand when they do not yet know what is coming, with a kind of solid, unhurried confidence. She looked at the other passengers again. They were still all looking out of their windows. She noticed something she had not noticed before. The older man near the front, the one with the canvas shopping bag, was wearing a coat she would not have expected on a man at 3 a.m. A proper wool overcoat buttoned to the collar. A hat she had not seen the style of in a long time. The 2 women in their 50s were also dressed in a way that was not quite now. Longer skirts, a particular cut of jacket. Not costumed, not theatrical, just slightly earlier. The way people in old photographs are not dressed strangely, only dressed in the clothes of their own time. The child had both hands flat on the seat. Still. Very still. Her hair was in 2 braids, and her shoes were the kind of shoes that buckled at the side. Dorota made herself look away. She made herself breathe slowly, the way she breathed when something in a ward was not going the way it should, not panicking, not naming the worst thing, just breathing and observing and staying present. She was on a bus. The bus was moving. She was in a seat. She was warm. These things were true. She could hold them. She looked at her hands in her lap, her uniform beneath her coat, the pale blue of the hospital, the small badge with her name, Dorota. She was a nurse. She had finished her shift. She had got on the 310. She reached into her bag and found her phone. The screen lit immediately. That was good. She pressed the map icon. It loaded and the blue dot appeared, and she stared at it for a long moment, trying to understand what she was seeing. The blue dot was in the right part of the city, the right general area, between the river and the old quarter, where these streets should be, but the streets around it were not named. The map showed the shape of roads, the general geometry of the city, but where the labels should have been, there was nothing. Just lines, just the shapes of streets, unnamed, as if the map did not yet know what they were called. She put the phone back in her bag. The bus slowed, not suddenly, gently, the way it always slowed when approaching a stop. She felt the familiar deceleration, the slight forward lean as the engine eased, the soft squeal of the brakes finding their grip. And then the bus stopped, and the doors opened with a hiss, and the night air came in, cool and damp. smelling of rain and stone, and something she could not name, something distant and almost sweet. None of the other passengers moved. She looked out of the window. There was a stop, a proper stop, a pole with a sign, though she could not read the text on the sign from where she sat. Beyond it, the avenue stretched away into orange light. The linden trees, the pale buildings, the cobblestones, wet and gleaming. It was beautiful. She noticed that and was surprised by it. The doors stayed open. The night air continued to move into the bus, cool and patient. She did not know where she was. She did not know when she was, if she was being honest with herself, though she did not quite let herself be honest about that yet. She knew only that the bus had stopped, and the doors were open, and somewhere outside there was a street she did not know, that felt like a street she had always known. She picked up her bag. She stood. She walked to the front of the bus. The driver's silhouette did not turn. She stepped down onto the rubber step, and then her foot was on the cobblestone, and it was solid and real and slightly wet. And the door hissed shut behind her. She stood on the pavement of the avenue she did not know. In the city she knew entirely. In the amber light of lamps from a different decade. The bus pulled away. She watched it go. The red tail lights moving down the avenue, diminishing, until it turned a corner and was gone. And she stood very still, her bag on her shoulder, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. And she listened. The city was quiet, not the quiet of absence, not the quiet of a place from which sound has been removed, the quiet of a place that has its own sounds, its own rhythms, that simply does not need to be loud to be present. Somewhere, a window. Somewhere, a radio, faint, very faint, playing something she recognized only as music. The distant note of a tram bell, far away, in another street. And beneath all of it, the wet stones, the linden trees with their bare branches, the pale buildings, watching her the way buildings watch, with patience, without judgment, with the particular indifference of things that have seen a great deal and will see a great deal more. She took one step forward. The cobblestone was solid. The air was cold. She was real. She walked. She did not know how long she walked before she found the corner she recognized. It came without warning. She turned a street that looked like all the other streets. And then there was the junction with the pink-fronted pharmacy and the old locksmith's sign. And beyond it, her tram stop. And beyond that, her city, exactly as she had left it. She stopped at the junction for a moment. She looked back. Behind her, the avenue was gone. There was only a building on the corner, solid and ordinary, and a side street she didn't recognize, but that looked like nothing in particular. Just a street. Just Warsaw. At 3:30 in the morning, damp and still and indifferent. She turned forward and walked on. She caught the 3:52 from the stop on Jelazna. The driver was different, young, tired, didn't nod. The bus was almost empty. She sat near the middle, placed her bag between her feet, and pressed her head back against the glass. She did not close her eyes. She watched the city pass. The real city. The familiar city. the city of lit petrol stations and stacked cafe chairs and pigeons on ledges. And she noticed, as she watched, that the street lamps cast an amber light onto the wet cobblestones, and that the light pooled there in long, wavering lines, and that if you didn't look too closely, it was almost the same color as the one she had left behind. She looked out of her window all the way home, not at anything in particular, just out, the way a person looks when they are watching for something, or watching something arrive. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even familiar streets can carry you somewhere else entirely. If this stillness stayed with you, if the amber light settled somewhere behind your eyes, then let it remain a little while longer. Some routes, after all, were never on the map. They were only ever meant to be felt. Rest now. The city will still be there in the morning.